the perception of India as projected through the Western media is being contested far more vigorously.
You know, when these global narratives are being set, right, it is also seen very often that the English media channels within the country, right, try to echo for validation or reach maybe the maximum reach that they want.
It's not that necessarily we have an alternative, but I think that I believe that the last word belongs to the West, or the West has said this, is no longer taken as gospel. We have not set up something like an Indian Al Jazeera, which is probably what we should. I'm not saying the editorial judgment of Al Jazeera is perfect. It's not. It's highly skewed, but at least it gives an alternative to the perspectives of BBC and CNN.
I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Swapan Dasgupta, veteran journalist and former MP Rajya Sabha, who will be with me talking to you about certain, ways in which the English language media has influenced the Indian scheme of things, the Indian politics or the Indian business landscape. My first question to you, Dr. Dasgupta, is from the BBC to the New York Times, the global English language media channels have reached far beyond our country. Why do you think their framing of India matters so much, not just abroad, but also here at home?
Well, firstly, I think they certainly matter abroad. The type of coverage of India, which was the prerogative of the Western media at one time, and I'm including all of them in one particular category, was by and large framed in terms of stereotypes. First, it became in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and up to the 70s, it was really the India, the land of deprivation, poverty, etc. From there, it changed quite a lot to India becoming the land of exotica. And there was the exotic India, which was there, the India of Bollywood, the India of, basically the elaborate rituals, the festivals, etc. That's really been the hallmark of the coverage there. Of late, what has happened since 2014, the BBC is one example, but the New York Times and some of the more quality newspapers in the West are framing it in terms of India having lost its way in politics. There is a certain distaste which institutions like New York Times, Washington Post, the BBC have for Mr. Modi. The reasons are difficult to fathom, but anyway, it's a reality. And as a result, some of its coverage has been slanted in that particular direction. And that coverage does not have too much of an impact on domestic opinion in India. And that's been a big change, that while it still matters in the overseas, it's had the influence of English language foreign media is rapidly diminishing within India. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the commanding heights which the English language media in India had domestically has come down quite considerably. It's the real center of gravity has shifted to Hindi, to the regional languages which have a far greater influence than the English language.
Yeah. So let us take something very fresh, look at the Air India Ahmedabad incident, and where, some of the media outlets wanted to quickly jump into a conclusion that it could possibly be because of India's aviation safety. They were raising questions on the aviation safety, the regulatory compliances, capabilities, even political accountability. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think there was a tendency to come to conclusion which said that basically Indians can't run airlines. That was the long and short of it. Secondly, there was also an undercurrent which would suggest that they wanted to negate the possibility. I'm not saying that that possibility exists and is bound in certainty, but there should be that they wanted to negate the possibility of any fault accruing to the manufacturer of the aircraft. In other words, Boeing Corporation, which is a formidable player, which has a great deal of influence in shaping the finances of individual journalists and individual corporations, media corporations in the West. And that line was almost incessantly persevered with the result that there was an understandable backlash within India. I think we went the other extreme in trying to actually show that everything was the fault of Boeing. I think the jury is still out as to what exactly happened. I don't think it's more possible. But all we can say is that to blame it on pilot error seems a bit facile. That I think Indian pilots are quite good. They run lots of aircraft. We have a very long and trouble-free history of civil aviation within India. And the number of accidents compared to the number of flights is probably minuscule.
Absolutely. In fact, it is. I find it wrong to jump to conclusions even before the verdict has been passed, right? So, do you think India has been framed differently, even perhaps through the post-colonial geopolitical era?
I'm not going into this entire post-colonial business, but all I can say is that the idea that India can be an industrial power, that India can be a sophisticated economy in the world is something which some people find a bit difficult to reconcile. And the reason they find it difficult to reconcile is that on the face of it, someone coming into Delhi, Bombay, etc., we probably find a lot of urban chaos. That we can progress, that our economic trajectory is going northwards despite this, and that one has very little to do with the other, and that everybody's economic progress cannot be measured by the same criterion is something which they find a bit different. And I think at the end of the day, I don't want to say it, but I find that there is an element of condescension which greets an attitude to India. And for that, sometimes we ourselves are responsible because we tend to be a bit submissive at times to what the world opinion is. The moment if we are to adopt a position of supreme arrogance, which I don't normally like to advocate, but sometimes I feel that probably is the only realistic response to that form of condescension.
When these global narratives are being set, right, it is also seen very often that the English media channels within the country, right, try to echo for validation or reach maybe the maximum reach that they want from such narratives or discussions. So does that kind of create a feedback loop that reinforces that the framing is inside India itself?
That used to certainly be the case. It was very one-sided. And certainly the Indian channels, TV channels, the print, big newspapers used to more or less echo or uncritically accept in a very slavish sort of way what was being said by the Western media. I don't think that's the case any longer. I think the perception of India as projected through the Western media is being contested far more vigorously. And that India, it's not that necessarily we have an alternative, but I think that I believe that the last word belongs to the West, or the West has said this, is no longer taken as gospel.
Yeah.
To that extent, I think we've come a long way.
Yeah, but what can India do to sort of, if we were to look at the path of media diplomacy or the corporate storytelling, what can we do to correct these balanced, skewed portrayals, to bring in some sort of, I would say, uniformity in terms of what we are trying to portray as what it is, rather than what we are following, what the world is trying to tell us?
Our focus overseas has been to the Indian diaspora. That's been the principal focus. That has its strengths, but that also has its serious limitations. We have not set up something like an Indian Al Jazeera, which is probably what we should. I'm not saying the editorial judgment of Al Jazeera is perfect. It's not. It's highly skewed, but at least it gives an alternative to the the perspectives of BBC and CNN.
Yeah.
I think we need to. This is not something which can be done by the state. This has to be something which has to be a business venture. This has to be something which is promoted by intelligent, discerning people in the media itself. But it's still not. It hasn't happened as yet.
Yeah. But do you think India needs a more strategic media diplomacy rather than, reacting to these negative coverage, but proactively sort of shaping our narratives?
Absolutely. You need that. I think our instinctive gut response has been that it's a bit like what Mr. Jaishankar often tells them, that we will not accept your double standards. But that's a, sharp put down. But in terms of a more positive approach towards India, creating a picture, a new image of India, that is still a work in progress. And I think it's a very work which is still got a long way to go. We know what's wrong with the projection of India from the West, but we haven't yet preferred a more rounded, realistic, objective alternative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swapan Dasgupta, for your very pointed, straightforward facts and opinions, as you've always been doing. And with that, we'll see you at the next episode of the Global Business Dialogues.